Hi, David.
Hi, Steve.
Thanks for coming on the show.
It's been a while,
Hasn't been too long.
a few weeks.
David, could you hand me my attaché case? Thank you.
So I just got back from Miami,
Yes.
and I brought you a genuine Cuban cigar,
Oh, well, thank you so much.
which I have right here.
I mean, are they sold openly?
Well, my cousin gave me this.
Is that
He said it was
right?
a genuine. Someone told me that you can't buy a Cuban cigar in Miami.
Well, I mean, I don't think you can buy a Cuban cigar anywhere in the United States.
Well, right, because it's contraband or it's,
Well, I mean,
they
John F. Kennedy signed an order, now I don't know if it was an executive order or not, banning, I don't know, it was an embargo, or I don't know if you'd call it an embargo, but I don't think any Cuban products are sold in the United States that I'm aware of. And
Even with the relaxation.
well, I mean,
Years ago, there was a sort of an opening to Cuba, wasn't there?
there was
Under
overtures, etc., under Obama, but it seems that that's going to the back burner, because people were talking about, well, we would have Cuban cigars here readily, and people would be going back and forth between Cuba, and none of that has happened. I mean, there was even talk about how the Cuban cigar industry was woefully prepared or woefully ill-prepared to meet the demands that the American market would put on it. But it hasn't happened. So, and yeah,
Have you ever had a genuine Cuban cigar
a
yourself?
genuine Cuban cigar? I don't think so, no.
Well, is it your impression that they're far superior? Or?
Yeah, my impression is so, yes. My impression is that, like a fine wine, a Cuban cigar is superior to every other cigar. And the Dominicans like to say, well, they took the seeds from Cuba and are growing, and the Dominican Republic has a big cigar industry.
Oh,
And they say they're using the Cuban seeds, so it really is as good or maybe better, or I don't think that's the case.
yeah, but you wonder what causes. Is it the quality of the tobacco or the growing conditions?
Well, I mean, it's
just
like
the history,
it's
maybe?
like producing a fine wine. You have a microclimate, and you have the expertise of the in the case of wine, of the vintners.
Mm-hmm.
But you will have the microclimate, and you have the grape itself, and those sorts of things. So it's a confluence of factors. It's multifactorial.
Well, you'll have to try that and tell me if it's better than the ones you normally.
Well, I don't think that I am enough of a cigar aficionado to even know. Like, for example, I met a kind of odd man on the train, a kind of odd fellow on the train. He was quite odd, and he had a whole fistful of cigars, and he gave me one. And, I was sure that this was a very cheap cigar, and it probably was. And I was even thinking of not smoking it. And then I smoked it at the Somerville City Club, and it was one of the most enjoyable cigars I've ever had. At the same time, my niece's boyfriend, our common law husband, I guess I would prefer to say, gave me some cigars for Christmas that I think were probably rather expensive, and I hope they were. I mean, I hope he didn't pass off some cheap stuff on me, but
Well,
you know, and,
I think you gave me one of yours once, I found a little bit bitter, I mean,
well, it's, you know.
they do have a wide variety of flavors, don't they?
Yeah, and I think also, let's say, I mean, you know, also the mood you're in, and you know, your physiological state would, I think, be a factor.
Well, we'll see.
But I know that that cigar that I had at the Somerville City Club was probably, I mean, it may have had something to do with the company, you know?
Yeah, you were talking, you were raving about that cigar.
Oh, was I really? It was a very long cigar, but not a thick cigar.
Yeah.
And it looked to me like very cheap. I mean, this guy, I think was in a bad way on the train, so I don't think he was, you know, had a fistful of cigars that were,
Well, I'm sure Levitt and Pierce sells probably the best, right?
well, I would assume they sell very, very good cigars. Yes, I would assume so, but I don't know that for a fact. And I mean, you know, men love cigars and good cigars, and I think it's a matter of,
Well, I've given up cigarettes for Lent,
right.
and so I feel maybe I could indulge in a cigar.
Oh, I think you probably should. I think you probably
I
should.
do miss I miss
Good.
the tobacco.
Good, but how much were you smoking prior to
Oh, gee.
giving it up for Lent?
Well, at least a half a pack a day.
Oh, that's not a lot of smoking. That's a very small amount of smoking.
Not a lot, but one thing I've noticed is that do you agree with the premise that it's hard just to smoke one or two cigarettes a day? That once you start, there's a natural impulse to want to smoke a lot. It's almost like you have to have a lot.
You have to have a lot.
What do you think of that?
I mean, I think it's like,
You enjoy them so much that you can't just have one.
I think that's, you know, it's like the famous commercial for Lay's potato chips. I bet you can only have one. I mean, these are very, you know, things that, I mean, I think our natural tendency as human beings is to want more of everything. And I think that is hard to moderate. I mean, I don't smoke all that much myself, but I mean, you know, but then again, I alternate cigarettes with snus, which I'm having right now, and I alternate I'll have a cigar maybe once or twice a week, and
Or a pipe.
I usually smoke a pipe. But I mean, I do think, that cigarettes, cigars, pipes, snus maybe even are superior to cigarette smoking. I think especially, well, a cigar will do something that a pipe won't do, and a pipe will do something that a cigar won't do. And one thing that a cigar will do that a pipe won't do is a cigar will steal your nerves.
Well, I mean, the thing about a pipe is that it seems like you can never keep the tobacco lit. I mean, there must be a trick to that.
Well,
every
you
time
know,
I try, it's like it goes out. in a
it's
few
not
seconds.
easy. I think so. You know, there are. I mean, I've met pipe smokers who say that they can smoke a pipe for hours or an hour on 2 matches. And then I've met other pipe smokers who say that really it's smoking matches more than smoking a pipe. So it's difficult,
Well,
you know,
yeah.
but I don't know if there's a trick. I've been smoking a pipe since about 1980, and I certainly don't know what the trick is, if there is a trick. Well, I mean, the trick is you smoke it slowly, but you gotta keep puffing it, but you don't wanna puff it too fast because you don't wanna overheat the tobacco. That's very important to the enjoyment of tobacco.
Mm.
But I think a cigar is very helpful to steal your nerves. Like, for example, I think Winston Churchill was able to withstand the stress of leading Britain during the Second World War I think it was very helpful that he was a non-stop cigar smoker.
Well, a lot of times he probably just had one in his mouth, right? He wasn't even smoking.
No, I don't believe
He was
that.
just chomping on it.
Who was saying that? I don't believe
I
that.
don't know, well, it's just the impression I've had from looking at pictures.
Well-
I might be wrong. I wouldn't know, there's no footage probably.
Well, I'm sure there's plenty of footage of him.
Well, I haven't seen it, that's what I mean, I haven't seen the footage.
Yeah, well, I mean,
I just see a picture with like a stub in his mouth a lot.
yeah, no, I think Winston Churchill, according to the New York Times, Winston Churchill smoked 300,000 cigars in his lifetime. 300,000.
It's more than one a day, I think.
Oh, God, I certainly hope so, no. And he smoked a kind of cigar, I think it was called a Monte Cristo, and I know for the movie, what was the name of the movie that recently?
Darkest Hour?
Darkest Hour. I know that Gary Oldman smoked constantly in the movie, and I think I think that they probably did a reasonable amount of study. So I don't think Winston Churchill, but even if Winston Churchill just held a stub in his mouth, still the tobacco, the nicotine is going into your system. So I mean, for example, if you read any of, if you read, like I read a book written by Adolf Hitler's secretary.
Turtle Youngie?
Yeah, right, Junge.
Say another name?
I would say Junge.
Youngie, yeah.
That's the way I would pronounce it.
Youngie.
But what do I know? I don't know German.
She wrote a book, I never.
I've read it. Yeah, I've read it. It's pretty good. It's pretty good. But if you read it, you get the impression that, well, first of all, Hitler was not able to withstand the stress of running the war. Unlike Churchill.
Yeah, he was
a mess.
Violently opposed to
Tobacco, right,
alcohol.
and he didn't use tobacco, and I think the fact that Churchill did use tobacco enabled Churchill to withstand the kind of stress and, deal with the kinds of things you have to deal with in almost a dispassionate way, not, and that's why, as I've said on this program innumerable times, that's why American Indians, when they held council, would never wouldn't think of holding council without smoking tobacco.
But you don't like commercial cigarettes, do you?
No, I like commercial cigarettes, all right.
But you prefer a hand roll.
Right, because I like the crudeness of them. They're more crude, But yeah, I've gotten used to them, and it's like Ovid said, Ovid, the Roman poet, nothing is as strong as habit. We get into habits, and so once we get into habits, it's very difficult to get out of them, although unfortunately it seems it's easier to get out of good habits than bad habits, right?
I guess, right, yeah, that's probably true.
Well, listen, David, let's go to the Smoker of the Week, and then we'll go to this, we'll discuss this article that you read.
Okay.
Okay? So we're gonna go to the Smoker of the Week, and see how well I do here. Here we go, the Smoker of the Week. Nice to have him on. He is a medical student from Great Britain named Stephen Pendry. And there was an article about him in the Telegraph online, which is one of the biggest papers in the world, called the Daily Telegraph. And he had very severe ulcerative colitis, which is a disease of the intestines.
Yeah, it's like an irritable bowel.
Well, I think it's akin there too, but
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I think it's worse. I think you can die from ulcerative colitis.
Yeah, it's bad. It's bad.
And, I mean, he suffered from, he would have to go to the toilet 15 times a day. He suffered dehydration, fatigue. The drugs that are used to treat ulcerative colitis are known to cause cancer. They wanted to give him surgery. You know, he might end up with one of those, I don't know what they call them, colostomy bags? Are they called
Colostomy.
colostomy bags?
Where they remove a section of your intestine.
Large intestine, yeah.
Yeah, that's terrible.
And he read an article in some medical journal about nicotine's effect on ulcerative colitis. It appears that smokers are much less likely to get this disease, and that many people, or some people who quit smoking, get the disease, and that nicotine is thought to have a very positive effect.
Hmm.
Stephen Pendry, he had to withdraw from school, it was so bad.
Mhm. Well, I wonder if it's at all like the way they say alcohol can have a kind of a tonic effect on the body. So,
Well, I think it can, but I don't, this is very specific. I mean, nicotine really just cures it. It's not,
Hmm.
and so he started smoking only 4 cigarettes. He didn't want to take the patch, because it wasn't as effective, and for him it was too costly because the National Health Service in England won't give you the patch to treat ulcerative colitis. So he started smoking cigarettes, and he smokes 4 a day, and within 2 weeks all the symptoms went away of ulcerative
It
colitis.
seems like that's something that should be passed on to the medical.
The medical profession is very well aware of this.
I mean, that's a pretty, grueling disease.
Yeah, well, the medical profession even sometimes tells people who have quit smoking and develop ulcerative colitis to restart smoking. Well, at least one medical professional who is a gastroenterologist who was quoted in this article that I read in thetelegraph.com. So that's Stephen Pendry, ulcerative colitis. You know, I was just reading that, for example, right now we have the lowest rate of smoking among teenagers that we've ever had in this country, since it's been recorded.
That goes against the commonly accepted wisdom, right?
Well, no, not really. I mean, anybody who's following this knows that the teenage smoking rate is very low.
Well, one thing in this article is mentions that Austria is, well,
Well, let's wait.
oh,
Okay, anyway,
You're-
and it's interesting because suicide rates among teenagers are going up. Not like, they're not dropping dead like flies, but they've surged, the suicide rate among teenagers.
Lower smoking, higher suicide.
Right, now, if there's any connection, I don't know. I mean, I'm curious. I don't know. I mean, I would,
Well, they say that can be related to the use of psychotropic drugs as well, I think I've read.
oh, really? Well,
A lot of teenagers are using psychotropics.
right, when they say the teenage smoking rate is, increasing, and then they may say it's increasing dramatically, or they're skyrocketing. Well, it's definitely, I don't use that term, but you have to understand we're talking relative and absolute. Like the absolute numbers there, very, very few teens commit suicide. It's 1 out of 100,000 and it goes to 2 out of 100,000. That's a pretty big increase, but it's still a very small number. So, but I'm just wondering if there is any connection between the low teenage smoking rate and the rise in suicides. It would be very difficult to tease out what the cause is, because teenagers doing all kinds of things, like many of them taking psychotropic drugs. They're drinking less, they're using fewer illicit drugs. At least that's the way they're responding on surveys.
Well, I mean, when you think about it, given the number of people who are mentally ill who benefit from smoking, then, it's not a unheard of proposition.
No, I don't, I mean, I think it's plausible. I mean, I think, and as I say, I think tobacco is very, very helpful for people who suffer from depression and other mental maladies. Okay, let's talk about this article from the, what is the bête noire of the right, the New York Times. Go ahead, tell me about it. Yes.
Should I show it?
No, I wouldn't. I wouldn't.
It's
I mean,
about, it's
you know,
about
what are
how,
you gonna show? I mean, you know,
well,
if we had an overhead camera, it might be worthwhile.
the title is called "The Far Right Wants to Give Austrians Freedom to Puff Away."
Yeah,
And it's about how the Freedom Party, which is a conservative party, has entered the government in Austria, and their leader is the vice chancellor of the government now, and the
Yes.
sports minister, and he's
he's
come
a
out.
sports minister, did you say? Oh, okay.
That's one of his portfolios in the government.
Yes,
And so he's come out, there's a big vote coming up in May in Austria to ban smoking in public places and all public places.
well, what does that mean, all public places?
Well,
I mean, what is a public place and what is a private place?
actually, let me, what it says is, it's interesting, it says that the bill is scheduled to go before Parliament is based on what's called the Berlin model, named after the German capital, which prohibits smoking in most public places, but allows it in smaller establishments and in designated areas.
Yes,
So that's the description of this bill.
right, so,
I don't know
well, I
exactly
mean, you
what
know, I mean, that comes down to what we define as a public place, and, you know, a bar is considered a public place, because, at least in the United States, we say that any place where the public is invited is a public place. But it's still a private place.
Right, well, right.
It's owned, you know, it's not
Yeah,
private
yeah.
property, so there's a problem there when people talk about public places. But go ahead, please.
Well, it says some coffee houses and restaurants are already banning smoking and anticipate, like you said, they're private, so they can do that.
Yes, they have that right.
And that's what they're doing, but it sounds like this country has got the highest smoking rate in Europe. So, you know, it's been a holdout against
That-
this trend, you know?
Yeah, that's a good thing.
Austria has one of the highest smoking rates among adults in the European Union. It was one of only 2 member states where the number of adults who smoked regularly did not decrease from 2000 to 2015.
From 2000 to 2015?
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's certainly a hopeful sign, very hopeful sign.
It also says that the part of the bill is to raise the age from 16 to 18, which is interesting. I didn't realize that the ages were so low in Europe. Did you?
Well,
I mean, it's 21 here, right?
well, no, but we don't have a federal law mandating 21. In fact, we don't even have a state law mandating 21. The state law of Massachusetts is 18.
Oh, it's 18. Okay.
Yes.
Is that most states? 18?
Yes, it is most states, yes.
Okay, all right, so we're already up to 18, okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but there are municipalities within the state of Massachusetts who have made it illegal to sell cigarettes to persons under the age of 21.
So, you know, it's a very interesting article. You know, it's
Does it say why the Freedom Party, I mean, you would think that the Freedom Party would be for adults having the freedom to smoke if they chose. So that's not,
well, it said it fits neatly with the Freedom Party's anti-establishment and quasi-libertarian tilt.
well, that's certainly good, and I really like the photo. It's too bad we don't have we can't upload it here. Well, we could be, you know, onto our screen.
Yeah, it shows some people in a cafe in Vienna.
And they look like they're thoroughly enjoying themselves, and none of them look all that young. So,
It sounds like there's a lot of conflict though within the country.
that's unfortunate, but I guess that's to be expected. I mean, smoking and tobacco have become taboo, you know, in many ways.
I know it's well, they're going to start debate on this bill this week. This is why the New York Times published this article. It's so maybe we'll be able to get some updates on.
Oh, I think so. I
what's
think
happening.
so. Yeah, I think so.
Go to the,
And the fact that, you know, fact that there is a organized political drive to allow adults to enjoy tobacco as they have done for hundreds of years, I think is very inspiring. And, I don't know why they call it, well, they call the Times calls it the far right. Would you say that this article was reasonably balanced?
I would, yeah, I mean, they quoted people from both sides, you know,
Mhm.
they quoted, some restaurant owners who were more conservative and some who are more open to smoking,
Well,
both sides,
yeah,
as I remember. You know,
well, it certainly seems like, again, this is the problem between property rights. What is public place? Because you open a restaurant and invite the public in. I mean, there was a case in New Hampshire recently where a man said that his business would not serve people who were Republicans.
yeah, you and I have talked about this.
Well, I mean,
yeah.
he has that right. That's not against the law. You are allowed to discriminate on the basis of political affiliation. You're not allowed to discriminate on the basis of race.
Race or some other.
Yeah, like race
Yeah.
or sex
Right.
or...
Right.
All right, this is it. Thanks for watching the smoking section. David, thank you for coming on.
Okay, thank you. See you soon.